This is Sharon Pierce for Near Desert Experience, NDE. It's 5:11 p.m. on the west coast of California on March 11th, 2024. As far as the primary election on March 5th, almost none of the races have been called 100%, but we pretty much know where most of them are going. Today, I'm going to focus here on part 3 on congressional districts 21, 22, and 23. 21 isn't really totally in the desert, but it is it borders a number of the districts that have to do with desert terrain and where there are dry lakes and sinks that have been collecting from the atmospheric rivers. So to begin with, we want to share the screen with District 21. And that is this district. It's small, it's Fresno for the most part. 20 takes a little clip of Fresno, California right here. So it's a bit about transportation, Highway 99, and then some of it's agricultural. Out in here, it's all ag country. Also orchards, nut farms. And this is a race between the incumbent, Jim Costa, and his challenger, Michael Maurer. There were some others, but these two are the two that are going to be on the general election ballot, because this is a top two primary election. Whichever two candidates receive the top two numbers of votes, they go on the general election, be they one from one party, one from another party, or both from the same party. So the press is reporting that the 2024 general primary election this year that took place on March 5th is the lowest turnout in recorded history for a primary election in California. Whoopee. So that's what's going on there. We have another sort of problem that affected election ballots. There are places here in California where mail hasn't been delivered for quite some time. And I was told today at the local post office, I've been told before that postal delivery has been light. Now I'm told that they actually know through investigation that mail coming into California or starting from California to someplace else is being misread by the computer system, and it's going to New York. And in New York, there's a large warehouse where the mail is being read again, and one day it may come back to us here. Those who are waiting paychecks, election ballots, things like that, wondered why they never got a ballot, like me. The answer is probably buried in this. I called the election board and I reported to the post office that I had not received my ballot when everybody else first received their ballot a few days into February. And so I was mailed a second ballot, and that arrived late. That arrived 9 or 10 days after they mailed it. And it's only 20 miles down the road, as far as I know, the county election office. So there's things here that are very wrong. And I'm going to throw something else that I just happen to know, because I follow United Kingdom, Great Britain news. They've had a big scandal for years with the computer system in their postal systems, but it had to do with billing. It didn't have to do with reading zip codes, as far as I know. And it cost postal workers their savings, and in some case their lives, because it wasn't corrected, it wasn't fixed, and the harassment was too much in the due course of time. Now let's look at District 21. So we have the incumbent, Jim Acosta, and his challenger, and they're both going to the November general election ballot. With 74% of the vote counted, the incumbent leads 53.1% to the nearest challenger at 46.9%. Now to get down to the environmental matters, we're getting a little rain this week, today and tomorrow, up in the Bay Area, and there'll be some down south as well. The 21st district includes most of Fresno, the north side of Visalia, little towns Dinuba, Exeter, Farmersville, Fowler, Kingsburg, Orange Cove, Parlier, Reedley, Sanger, Selma, and Wood Lake. And again, that is right here in the middle. And those towns sort of are named going down this way. And a lot of that is Highway 99. It is considered a Democratic stronghold. It has been for a very long time. Now, there's little in the way of dry lakes except for Bravo Lake, that's a proper lake, and there's a little lake east of Visalia. But this district does pick up from Fresno on down. It picks up a little bit, I believe, of the Great Tulare Lake Basin, which was drained and turned into farmland. And now nature is taking it back by filling up the sink of farmland that was the lake with water again. And the farmers are rushing out to drain it overnight secretly. And the police are telling them to stop it. And that's what's going on down here. All around down here, Tulare Lake was one of the biggest freshwater lakes west of the Continental Divide, and it fills with rivers. These are rivers that come down into the valley, and they go through the lakes that are around here and then come out over here. But Tulare Lake was leveed all the way around, no outlet, drained and turned into ag land. And it's not, Mother Nature is saying, no more. All right, so here we are. It's a diverse population in District 21, Portugal, Japan, many places around the world have residents in that district. Now going on to District 22. A lot of this was Tulare Lake. Now it's farmers growing in the dry bed of Tulare Lake, but the dry bed isn't staying dry. It's flooding, inundation. So we had some of that again this year, not like 2 years ago, which was huge. But the waters, the rainwaters are coming. You've heard, like LA, all the water in LA flooded. Well, this rain pattern tends to go up like this. And this is where Death Valley was, and where I mentioned in part 2, big Bad Man's Basin is right in here. So that was flooded and people were kayaking in it. The water goes up this way and it arcs around Las Vegas. In District 22, the incumbent, a Republican, with 62% of the vote counted as of now, is at a straight ahead 33.7%. The closest Democrat, and these two ran against each other in 2022, and it was one of the closest races in the country. The Democrat was back about 6 percentage points a few days ago, and now he's at 29.2. Valadao is at 33.7. So they're 4% difference. However, this is the primary. The Democrats voted on the Democratic side on their ballot, and the Republicans voted on their ballot. And sometimes the Democrats allow independents and or no party preference voters to vote in their election, but it was a low turnout. In the general election, it will be different. We think it's logical that it will be different. And so these two people are back in it neck and neck, I would say. Salas leads in the southern part of the district in Kern County, and the incumbent Valadao in the middle and the northern. So this area is Democrat. And this is what I want to point out. This is all Democratic. This was Kevin McCarthy's strongly Republican seat. But other than Bakersfield, the largest population area for voters for District 20 is in Fresno. And this area is where the Democrat is Salas, Rudy Salas, is getting most of his votes. So this is one of the reasons why I think as this expands, more water comes in, more people come in, because it's more suitable for living conditions. That's one reason why I think 20 will trend to a more populist vote, and down at this end too, because you're just coming out of LA. Palmdale, Lancaster is right here, but you're just coming out of LA. And this area has highways, and there's Ridgecrest up here, and there's more towns filling in over and through here. That's my thought about that. Now the landscape is Tulare Lake, Buena Vista Lake bed, Fresno. It also includes part of Hanford, this district, and part of Bakersfield is in this district. So I do want to mention some things about it. This is about Fresno County itself. And I'm reading this, I'm narrating this, is unique among California counties in the range of natural resources, forests, riverways, and wildlife habitats that encompass its vast terrain. Centrally located, the county swaths an east to west crossway through the San Joaquin Valley, starting from the spine of the Sierra Nevada mountains on the east, cascading down through the chaparral of the foothills, descending on the agriculturally rich soils of the valley floor, and continues west to the inner coastal range. That's a mountain range. That's a little spine before you get to, it's a beautiful spine actually of mountains before you reach the coastline. So some of the cities are Bakersfield, Tulare, Portersville, Corcoran, and so forth, Hanford. There's just an astounding amount of water there. So far, water flooding to the east of Corcoran, and back in the days when Tulare Lake was full, it would have covered the area of the town of Corcoran. There's just an astounding amount of water. So water flooding to the east of Corcoran onto land that has subsided in recent years from excessive groundwater pumping hasn't reached the town. Those include the Pozo Creek out of Kern County, White River and Deer Creek in Tulare County, and Mill Creek in Fresno County, which dumps into the King River. The King River comes down, the Kern River comes down, some of the San Joaquin River comes down, and some of these other creeks and so forth. Over the decades, farmers, including a very big farmer named Boswell, have erected a complex system of levees and canals to try and stem the flows and redirect them to the flood cells or channels them north, eventually going out through the bay, picking up into the San Joaquin River, San Joaquin Bay. But when the water is ripping, there's no way to build a moat around the lake bed, as one observer noted. Let the water run downhill was a common refrain from numerous residents at a special supervisor meeting, according to the minutes. Now there's levee 749, which was on Mr. Boswell's land, would be cut at its highest point, though it wasn't stated when that would happen. And then the little history before the lake's disappearance into irrigation canals. That's what they did. They leveed, they dried up and drained the lakes, and they created canals to water their crops around the, periphery. They created irrigation canals and spigots People talk about there being so many wetland birds that if you startled them when they lifted off, it was like a giant clap that's resounded across the landscape. Now, after less than a year back, birds from 22 to 23, birds of all kinds, pelicans, hawks, water birds, are returning. And the Tachi, that's an Indian tribe, also say they've seen burrowing owls nesting around the shore, a species described as vulnerable or imperiled, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So people do not want the lakes levied again. They're looking at this from a different perspective these days. They want their fish and wildlife, their natural terrain, to allow itself to self-restore if that's what it wants to do without getting too much in the way. And the argument that the farmers have that, well, we have to have the land for farming, isn't totally well received, because there's a lot more produce being put out than we're using, some people believe. Do we need all the grape vineyards? Do we need all the orchards? Maybe we do to some extent, but they're looking at this with more of a jaundiced eye after the 20th century. This is the 21st century. Tulare Lake was once part of the Pacific Flyway. It was an important stopover area for migratory birds. The loss of that habitat has been a major issue in bird conservation and bird diversity. Something that continues is the birds know how to find the lake again. It's like they've always been looking for it. In addition to species returning, including fish and amphibians, likely brought down from the Sierras by rainfall and flooding, so lots of watery type creatures that live in and around the lakes and rivers are being floated down, is that winds off the lake can cool temperatures by as much as 10 or 20 degrees. So the hot summers can be cooled down there. And what does that say about population growth? This is my position. I'm extending it out for people to think about instead of having to scream about it 10, 20, 30 years from now when some people just took control of the situation for their own private benefit. Now, a real benefit when the San Joaquin Valley summers often spike well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The first is the Tachi Yokuts. It's a native tribe, indigenous, for whom, quote, the return of the lake has been just an incredibly powerful and spiritual experience. They've been holding ceremonies on the side of the lake. They've been able to practice their traditional hunting and fishing practices again. The other two groups affected have been most affected are those involved in agricultural production, farm workers on the one hand, and the growers on the other, those who own the land and employ the workers. The growers over the last 5 decades or so have built a complicated system of flood prevention. In the latest flooding, these measures protected some of their farmland, which was essentially the lowest elevation part of the historic lake. But by cordoning off this low-lying farmland with canals and weirs, it was the surrounding communities of workers that have now been flooded by Tulare Lake. Many of the farm workers don't speak English or are procedurally very distant from the state. Unfortunately, they are also the ones who experience the most personal place-based impact in terms of having their housing flooded or losing their homes entirely. Most of the news coverage talked about catastrophic flooding, but what was not talked about so much is that it wasn't only an experience of loss, it was also an experience of resurgence. There's the return of native wildlife and to the Tachi's ability to practice their traditions on the water. Native American tribes, the indigenous, have a lot of strength in California, maybe more so than almost anywhere in the 48 contiguous states. Efforts are already underway to drain the lake once more, and it is expected to remain in some form for about 2 more years, although new atmospheric river events over California this year could complicate that prediction. It did drain down. Some of it was evaporated, some of it was drained. They left some of it, and then rains came in the winter of 2024 and expanded again, not to where it was 2 years ago, but it's showing the rivers are continuing, the expansion of Tulare Lake is continuing. Under climate change, the spokesperson said floods of this magnitude or higher will happen with increasing frequency. I think it would behoove the state of California to realize that Tulare Lake wants to remain. And in fact, there's a lot of economic benefit that could be gained from letting it remain, said Miss Anna Underhill. I believe she was from the either Agriculture Department or Parks and Recreation, something like that, Rivers and Parks. At a certain point, I think of what happens next, Underhill says that this landscape has always been one of lakes and woodlands. And our current irrigated culture, agriculture, just a blip on a century-long screen in its large geologic history. This area as farmland, blip on the screen. This was not actually a flood. This is a lake returning. So that's 22, and then 23. This is 23. The Mojave Desert, Mojave Reserve over here. This is 40, this is 15, I-40, I-15, Needles, California. You go up here into Bullhead City and past Searchlight into Vegas. The high population areas are Victor Valley with Victorville, on the edge of the San Bernardino Mountains and Los Angeles National Forest. It's Apple Valley. That was out where Roy Rogers and Dale Evans had their ranch that people went out to visit. It was all right in here. This is little bits of dry lakes that fill up with water. Barstow, Baker, and then on to Las Vegas. The current incumbent, Jay Obernold, a gaming man, a man who designed gaming systems. He worked in Las Vegas. He's a cyberspace security expert, one of 2 in Congress right now. That's his business. He lives out in this area somewhere, either Big Bear or one of the little towns around here. He ran against Derek Marshall last time, and they're gonna go forward from here as number 1 and 2. Obernold, with 99% of the vote in, is at 63.6% of the votes, with Marshall at 36.4. So it's 64-36. And it's going to go forward. It's considered a safe Republican seat. But this is where the water is coming. Sometimes it comes down this way. This is the highway that goes up north to Lone Pine and South Tahoe, and a little bit in Nevada. It goes through this district. So over 7 inches of rain fell this year in Death Valley. That was in 3 due to atmospheric rivers. Badwater Basin is a former inland lake, and the deep part where the lake really forms in it is Lake Manly. It dried up a long time ago, but it fills up when the great storms come in. The winter storms and heavy rains, coupled with large water releases from mountain reservoirs and flooding, have resulted in conditions of extreme peril within the town of Apple Valley, including potentially calamitous water levels in the Mojave River, town officials say. The reservoirs are full. If it keeps raining, they have to release their water, and that's like with the Kern River is just about at flood stage, and the others are at normal level. But once you start letting more water down, there can be flooding down in the San Joaquin Valley. So District 21, 22, and 13. Because the river can only absorb water so quickly, the storm subsequently skirted along through Barstow as far as Yermo. So that was close to flooding. Consequential weather events occur on average 6 to 8 years, but that cycle isn't consistent. And the peaks are very variable, it has been reported. So this is part of the Mojave around Death Valley, and it's normally an underground river that comes up. Mojave River, 9/10 of it is underwater, and that comes up for about 100 miles around Barstow, California. Another view of it. Here we go, and here's the fact of it. Here's Highway 15. Here's Old Highway 40. Here's the Mojave National Preserve. The river, Mojave River, comes out here and goes down to Barstow. This area just up above here is Death Valley. And it's greening. And then you have a lot of water now in Lake Mojave on the Nevada side, around the Colorado River, Needles, Bullhead City. So you can see that it's greenish along there, although Colorado River has been a greatly depleted river. In the past six months, Death Valley received more than double its annual rainfall, recorded about 4.9 inches where it's normally about 2 inches. That may not seem a lot to some, but it is enough to bring a couple of inches into the 2 or 3 inches into Badwater Basin, and people can go out on their little flatboards and kayaks and paddle around out there for history. Representative Oberno last December, in a letter to ICE, urged the administration to do more to find a legal settlement to allow more migrants to be detained in this area instead of allowing them to be just released into the interior. There's a prison up here that's not very full, up in his district, over around in here somewhere, and he'd like it to be used. He's co-sponsored a bill to utilize the almost empty prison for detaining illegals. He wants them invited in and he wants to detain them, suggesting it could house up to 2,000. There are also secret marijuana grows back in there, not that there's a lot of forest, but there's some ground cover, and that's another issue. with where the people who come in illegally go. Well, they're more or less driven undercover as slaves out to these places to work in the groves, and when they try to make an escape plan, their cartel under which they're there and being controlled has, a few weeks ago, there was a major shooting. About 6 of the workers were killed, and they rounded up the shooters. So that's one of the things that's happening out there. The person who is challenging Overnold is an executive with the travel company Kayak. As it turns out, I mean, that company, well, he formerly worked in Nevada for Bernie Sanders and so forth. He's a progressive, and he's done some work for the United Nations. So his comment goes like this. Mr. Marshall says, I don't think there's any one approach or characteristic that makes a person a strong elected official. Again, diversity is a good thing. Having some folks in the mix who are great at giving speeches, and some who are great at the nitty-gritty of writing policy, and some who are good at coalition building, all these are necessary. As for what I think will make me successful in office, I'm good at finding nerdy policy solutions for problems that disproportionately affect less resourced people. The nonprofit I founded to work with the UN basically worked to make the United Nations planning and information resources more broadly accessible in order to help smaller countries and their tiny diplomatic corps participate fully in the United Nations global goals. Okay, so that's what this is all about. There's more, you can read about it. But that's House District 23, and that's where we're at this point. So I'll just leave this right here. We'll stop the sharing. And here we are, and thank you very much for watching, listening, and taking in some of the points I'm trying to make here. My name is Sharon Pierce, and this is Near Desert Experience.